What is going on, people? So here I have the Ryobi Brushless Impact Wrench, and we're going to unbox it. I'm going to talk you through my thoughts, and then we're going to take the lug nuts off the car and see how it performs. All right. So here we have our main tool in here. And straight away I can feel that this tool here is quite heavy along the top here. So this tool roughly weighs sort of a bit over a kilo, and it feels quite unbalanced in my hand. But I can imagine that by the time I put a battery on here, that will sort of balance it back up and it'll feel quite nice. So let's put a battery in here. This is the skin only, so it didn't come with a battery. You've got to buy a battery, additional batteries if you don't already have one. And this is the 5 amp hour battery, and so this battery here weighs sort of a kilo as well. So that actually feels really nice, really balanced in my hand now. If you were to use a smaller battery like a 1.3 amp hour battery, it's a little bit lighter, and then if you were to use a 9 amp hour battery, it's a bit heavier again. So really happy with that. That feels so nice in my hand. Just looking at the tool here, we can see that, so it lights up there. So we've got the 3 lights there, so that's the sort of triome light system there. So that's really handy if you're working in sort of dark areas and you need a little bit additional light there. What else can we see here? So this is kind of like a little slidey chuck. So if we have it in the middle there, the tool won't work, and then if we push it to the left, we get motion there, and then we push it all the way to the right, and then either one of these will undo or tighten. I'm not quite sure which is which. So this model is the brushless version. I do know that Ryobi make a brushed version of this, and I'm going to try and explain to you the difference between a brushed and a brushless motor. So I'm not an expert on this. I don't know all the ins and outs, and I don't know the exact mechanism, but I'm going to give it a crack, and if you guys can help me out, add some more information into the comments below, that'll be really good. So typically what we have is we have a brushed motor, and a brushed motor has got these sort of carbon brushes, and then we have the battery. So the battery provides DC current to the brushes, and that sort of attaches onto a thing called a commutator, and that commutator attaches onto a thing called a armature, and that armature sits inside within the motor, sits inside a sort of a magnet, and then that creates a magnetic field, and then that armature spins around, and then that's what we see, the spinning motion of the tool. And then if we look at the brushless version, well, the brushless version has battery, which provides DC current again to a whole heap of electronics, and that electronics allows a thing called attaches onto I think it's called a stator. Attaches onto a stator, and the electronics provide sort of a regulated amount of input to the stator, and that stator sits inside a sort of a magnet as well, which creates a magnetic field which allows this rotating thing to spin around. So basically the difference between the two tools, brushless or brushless, is just the brushes. Now a lot of people will say that over time what happens is the brushes, they tend to sort of get broken, they start to degrade, and then over time what happens is your tool will then stop being able to be used. Also what happens is that brushes, they create quite a lot of heat and build up, and then as the tool gets hotter it has to draw a lot more sort of battery power, and then the tool becomes inefficient. So basically what people say, get a brushless motor because it's going to last longer. In theory what they're saying is that the tool now becomes more reliable. So another couple of things to consider is that this tool here, the brushless tool, it costs, I think it's roughly about $80 more expensive than the brushed version. So the brushed version is $219 at Bunnings. This was $300. So it comes down to kind of personal preference if you're willing to spend that extra money for supposedly a more reliable battery or not. That's totally a more reliable machine. That's totally up to you. The brushed version also comes with high torque, which I think is about 360. This comes with peak torque 270. But all things considered, Ryobi actually give a really good warranty program. So Ryobi on their lithium ion power tools have a 4-year warranty, and then their batteries, the lithium ion batteries, they have a 3-year warranty. And I know from personal experience, I've had to take tools back before that have broken. Bunnings, their policy return is really good. So no questions asked on the return of the product. So both Ryobi and Bunnings definitely stand by that sort of that warranty program there. So from a consumer point of view, that's really good and handy to know. So going back to this tool, it's got variable trigger. So this trigger, you can slowly ramp it up. So there we've got the variable trigger. And that's really good because that gives you control about how fast this square anvil is going to rotate. And on the bottom here, we have our settings. So if we want to choose the lowest setting, which is setting number 1, that spins at 1800 RPM and has 130 Newton meters of torque. Setting number 2 has spins at 2200 RPM at 180 Newton meters of torque, and then setting number 3 rotates at 3000 RPM and at 270 Newton meters of torque. And also on the end here, we've got this thing called auto stop. So this is a really cool feature. What happens is if you turn that on, this machine will shut off when it's reached torque of 120 Newton meters. So that means the machine will stop. And then that's kind of a safety feature that will prevent you from over tightening any of the any bolts or anything like that that you're wanting to tie down. What else can I say about this tool? The most important part of this tool is this 1/2" square anvil here. Now this square anvil allows you to put on your 1/2" sockets, and we can see on the very end here is that little pin there. Now that little pin is called a detent pin, and that allows you to put your socket on, and on socket sets, some of them have got a little hole there, and if we line those two up and push it in together, that little pin inside there holds the socket on. So you can, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but you can get other types of anvils that are out there, and some other anvils come with this thing called a friction ring, which is a little ring that goes around almost the outside of the anvil. Now that sort of acts the same thing as this pin, but what you got to do is you got to make sure that you line your socket up nice and square and flush on to get it on. So it can be a little bit trickier to get on, but it's easier to take off. Now with this pin type, or this detent pin, it's a lot easier to get on but harder to get off. So that just comes down to personal preference, but unfortunately Ryobi has already made that decision for you. You can only get this tool in the 1/2" square anvil, and it's only in the detent pin form. And then finally, Ryobi have given a really cool feature here, and for those of you who watch the videos quite regularly, I love accessories, and this is a really neat accessory in here. It's an additional feature. So what they've done is they've given us this little 1/2" adapter here. So we can see there that that's our 1/2" adapter. That will just slot right onto here. And what that does is that now converts it into a hex head, and I've given us a nice little tool here. So the little hex head will go into there, hex tool, clip it in, and then now we've got a Phillips head on the end here. So this is going to act a bit like a screwdriver. So you could also go to sort of a place like Bunnings, and you could buy other sort of hex tools with a hex bit on it, and then you could have different types of heads on there for different types of applications. So that's a really handy, neat little feature. I do know alternatively that if you do have an impact driver, it doesn't have a square anvil on here, but it does come with sort of a thing like that on the end of it. And what you could do is you could buy something like an adapter here that's got the hex bit with a square anvil on there, and then you could use that with your socket. So you could buy one with a square anvil head of 1/2" or 3/8, and then you could attach that on and use that just like that. But the main reason why I bought this is for taking off things like lug nuts and things like that. So this square anvil is definitely the thing that I want. It's the square anvil which is going to work with my 1/2" socket set. Alternatively, if I wanted to use other size sockets, maybe a 3/8 or a 1/4", you can buy 1/2" adapters that will then convert that down to 3/8, so that you could get those smaller sockets on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, put this tool to the test, take some of the lug nuts off the car and see how it performs. Okay, so I'm going to try this tool on these lug nuts here. So this is a Subaru 2007 WRX, and Subaru recommends that these wheel nuts are torqued to 100 Newton meters. So I'm going to use a impact socket, so I recommend using an impact socket with an impact wrench. We'll try this on setting number 1. So setting number 1 is 130 Newton meters. We'll see if it'll take it off. It might do. And if it doesn't, then we can just ramp it up and just see how we go. So here we are, setting 1, 130 Newton meters. Make sure it's off neutral and away we go. No, so it hasn't taken those nuts off at all. We'll ramp it up. We'll go to setting number 2, which is 180 Newton meters, and see if we can budge it then, see if we can crack it. So that required a little bit more effort, and I wonder if it's because we slightly loosened it from the first time, but we can try it again on another one. So it does do it. It does sort of struggle a little bit at the beginning, but it does eventually crack those wheel nuts off. We're going to try setting number 3, which is the peak torque, which is the 270 Newton meters, and see if it takes it off a little bit easier. Yeah, that's a lot easier. It's not struggling as much on that higher torque setting. So I'd recommend, if you guys are going to use one of these to take the lug nuts off, just to use the higher torque setting, which is the 270 Newton meters. The machine seems to handle that a lot easier. And there we are. Wheels are off. Well, the wheels aren't off, but the lug nuts are undone. So that's really easy, and that sort of has prevented a lot of hard effort, you know, using one of those socket wrenches, really getting in there to undo these nuts. That did it super easy, so I'm really happy with that. Really convenient, saved me a lot of time, and I'm really pleased I got this. So I recommend that for this type of application. Okay, so now that I've gone around and undone all these lug nuts, I need to do them back up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finger tight them on, get the nuts started, and then I'm going to go around and I'm going to tighten them up using the that impact wrench there. Now, I don't really recommend this, and you probably shouldn't be doing it, but the lowest setting of this impact wrench is 130 Newton meters. The setting that Subaru recommends for these wheels to be tightened to is 100 Newton meters. So there's every chance here that if I use this to tighten up, I'm going to end up over tightening these lug nuts. So that can be really dangerous. But with that variable trigger, I should be able to just slowly increase the variable trigger until I feel that those wheel nuts are tight. And just bear in mind that you can over tighten this, so you just got to be a little bit careful with a tool like this. And then I'm going to go around with my torque wrench, and then I'm going to torque them down to that spec of 100 Newton meters. So what you could do to be really sure is that you could use the auto stop setting here, and that auto stop means that it will stop tightening when it reaches 120 Newton meters. That's still slightly too high for this application, so just be really careful doing this. And so that's about as much as I would do. Probably go a little bit more. And when tightening up your lug nuts, you want to do it in that star pattern, and that just makes sure that the wheel here, the rim, is nice and flush with the hub of the wheel there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is lower the car back down, go around with my torque wrench and torque to 100 Newton meters. Okay, so now that the car is lowered, we can now torque to our spec 100 Newton meters. So there we are, these wheels are nice and safely back on the car. Okay, so that's a quick wrap on the Ryobi 18V Brushless Impact Wrench. I've really enjoyed using this tool. It's nice and small, it's compact, and I've enjoyed using the half-inch anvil on here. I've been able to use it seamlessly with my half-inch socket sets, and that's kind of the main reason why I got it, was to take off things like lug nuts. So if you're interested in any more of these Ryobi tools, we've made a couple of other videos, so check that out in the playlist above. Please hit the subscribe button to keep the content coming from Omni Garage, because there's plenty more of these Ryobi tools left for us to try out. Thanks for watching.